know that part of the deal was you had to have sex with this guy?
I didn't know at first what was going to happen, especially that first night, because
Picture this. You're walking through one of the most famous houses in America. Upstairs, there are parties with celebrities, fancy drinks, and people having what looks like the time of their lives. But if you could go downstairs into the basement, you'd discover something that would make your blood run cold. Hidden cameras, secret recordings, mountains of videos that were used to control and blackmail people. This is a true story of what was really happening beneath Hugh Hefner's Playboy mansion, and it's so much darker than anyone could have imagined. Most people think they know Hugh Hefner's story, the guy who started Playboy magazine through wild parties and lived surrounded by beautiful women. But what happened in the basement of his mansion was something completely different. It wasn't just a place where secrets were kept. It was where crimes were committed, where people were hurt, and where evidence was stored that would eventually lead to over 10 lawsuits and destroy the reputation of one of America's most famous men. Today, I'm going to take you into the darkest corners of the Playboy Mansion and show you what was really going on when the cameras stopped rolling and the party guests went home. Trust me, you're not ready for how disturbing this gets. Hugh Hefner wasn't always the party-loving guy you see in old photos. He was born on April 9, 1926, in Chicago to parents who were extremely strict. His mom and dad were religious people who didn't believe in showing affection, watching movies, or talking about anything related to romance or intimacy. They created a cold, rule-filled house where young Hugh felt trapped and unloved. Even as a little boy, something inside him was fighting against all those restrictions. He would secretly draw pictures of women in his room, which was shocking behavior for a kid being raised in such a strict home. Later in life, Hefner said that growing up without any warmth or physical affection from his parents made him obsessed with finding those things in unhealthy ways. He was actually really smart, with an IQ of 152, but his grades in school were just average because he was more interested in his imagination than his homework. He started writing comic books where he made himself the hero of exciting adventures. When he was 16, a girl named Betty broke his heart, and that pain changed him completely. He started calling himself Hag and began creating comics about his own school life. After high school, he joined the Army in 1944 and served until 1946. He was lucky enough to get a desk job instead of having to fight in a war, and he spent those years chasing women and drawing cartoons. He later said that if he had seen combat, he might never have started Playboy because the experience would have changed him too much. When he got out of the Army, he went to college to study psychology, creative writing, and art. He worked incredibly hard and finished his degree in just 2.5 years. While he was in college, he became the editor of a humor magazine and started a section called Co-Ed of the Month, which shocked a lot of people but gave everyone a hint of what he would create later. In 1952, Hefner was working at a magazine called Esquire, making $60 a week. When he asked for a tiny raise of just $5 and they said no, he quit his job. It was a risky move, but he was fed up with being told what to do. He borrowed $600 by using his furniture as collateral and raised another $8,000 from 45 different investors, including his own mother, who didn't really believe in his idea but loved him enough to help anyway. He wanted to call his new magazine Stag Party, but he ran into legal problems with that name. So he came up with Playboy instead. The very first issue was put together in his tiny kitchen in Chicago. He wasn't even sure there would be a second issue, so he didn't put a date on the cover. For that first magazine, he bought nude photos of Marilyn Monroe for just $500. These pictures had actually been taken in 1949, years before Monroe became a huge movie star. She never worked with Playboy and never even met Hefner, but her image lying on red velvet became one of the most famous magazine covers in history. The first issue sold almost 54,000 copies at 50 cents each. Hefner didn't just want to show pictures of women. He included articles about jazz, music, sports, and even detective stories. He wanted people to think his magazine was smart and sophisticated, not just something men looked at for cheap thrills. Today, an original copy of that first issue can sell for more than $100,000. The magazine became hugely successful really quickly. By 1955, it was selling 100,000 copies every month. But Hefner's success attracted attention from the government. The U.S. Postal Service tried to ban Playboy, calling it inappropriate and harmful. Hefner fought back in court and won, which allowed him to print in full color and expand his business even faster. In 1960, he opened the first Playboy Club in Chicago. It was like a fancy restaurant and bar where men had to pay for special memberships just to get inside. The waitresses wore satin costumes with bunny ears and tails that became famous all over the world. Behind the scenes, though, these women had to follow incredibly strict rules about their weight, appearance, and behavior, and they would be punished if they didn't meet the standards. The club was packed with visitors, welcoming over 132,000 people in just 3 months. Eventually, there were 40 Playboy clubs around the world in places like London and Jamaica. But what people didn't know was that these clubs were just the beginning of something much darker. In December 1959, Hefner bought a massive 70-room mansion in Chicago for $370,000. This wasn't just any house. It had secret tunnels, a swimming pool with a waterfall entrance, and rooms filled with mirrors and special lighting. After his divorce from his first wife, he moved into this mansion and started throwing wild parties with hundreds of guests. Even back then, FBI agents were watching the mansion during their investigations into whether Hefner was breaking laws about inappropriate content. But what they didn't know was that Hefner was already setting up something that would be much worse than anything they were investigating. In 1971, Hefner made the move that would define the rest of his life. He bought the famous Playboy Mansion in Los Angeles for just over $1 million. This house had been built in 1927 in a Gothic style, and it came with some very interesting features that most people didn't know about. Hidden behind panels in the basement was a secret wine cellar that had been built during Prohibition to hide alcohol when it was illegal. Hefner discovered this space after he bought the house, and instead of using it for wine, he turned it into something much more sinister. He used that hidden basement area to store private videos and photos that he had secretly recorded using security cameras placed all around the mansion. He actually bragged about having these secret recordings in a magazine interview in 2011, not realizing how terrible it made him sound. The stone vaults and hidden doors added to the mystery, and they made people wonder what else might be buried beneath that famous house. During the 1970s, Hefner had workers add even more tunnels and underground rooms beneath the mansion. These tunnels connected the main house to other buildings on the property, so that staff members could move around without being seen during parties. Some former employees claimed that these tunnels once connected to the homes of famous actors like Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty, though these connections were supposedly shut down in 1989. But the tunnels weren't just for staff to use. They became part of a much darker system that Hefner used to control and manipulate people. In 1978, Hefner built an underground gym beneath one of the buildings on his property. It had the best exercise equipment money could buy, tanning beds, saunas, and beautiful stone showers. He claimed it was built for one of his girlfriends, but the truth was much more disturbing. Hidden cameras were installed throughout this underground gym, and staff members later revealed that these cameras were used to record intimate encounters without people's permission. One former employee described horrific events that he called pig nights, where women were filmed while Hefner watched everything on large television screens, smoking and laughing like it was entertainment. These recordings weren't just kept for Hefner's personal enjoyment. According to several sources, he used them to blackmail and control celebrities and other guests who visited the mansion. If someone crossed him or tried to expose what was really happening, he could threaten to release embarrassing videos of them. During the 1980s, the basement was expanded even more. Hidden vaults were built to store thousands of hours of video recordings and detailed blueprints of secret rooms that had been designed specifically for inappropriate activities and drug use. One person who worked as a video librarian later revealed that these vaults contained more than 1,000 individual tapes. The renovations included carved wood panels, hidden mirrors, and private bedrooms that were designed solely for filming intimate encounters. These vaults became like time capsules of Hefner's secret world, filled with evidence of activities that would destroy lives and reputations if they ever became public. Even the original stone vaults from 1927 were converted into hiding spots for the most shocking videos. These vaults had been built in a Gothic revival style with pointed arches and thick stone walls that kept everything perfectly preserved. One staff member claimed that there were over 100 tapes of famous celebrities stored in climate-controlled safes, with some of the oldest recordings dating back to the late 1970s. The basement became a maze of interconnected rooms, each one holding different types of evidence. There were rooms filled with drugs, rooms filled with recording equipment, and rooms filled with thousands of photographs and videos that documented years of illegal activities. But the mansion itself wasn't the only location where these activities took place. During the 1980s, Hefner and his associates allegedly operated what they called shadow mansions across Los Angeles. These were secret houses where women were brought under the promise of becoming models or actresses, but were actually being used for parties and other activities. A doctor named Mark Saginner, who was nicknamed Dr. Feelgood, allegedly helped transport up to 20 women per week to these locations under the pretense of doing photo shoots. One woman reported being drugged at one of these shadow mansions in 1985 and then being brought back to the main Playboy mansion while she was unconscious. Detailed logs were kept in the basement of the main mansion, tracking who went where and when, using secret codes that only insiders understood. These records suggested that the abuse and illegal activities weren't limited to just one house, but were part of a carefully organized system that operated for years. Many former girlfriends and employees have spoken about the massive amount of drugs that were stored in the basement. One woman named Sandra Theodore said there were drawers filled with up to 500 pills at a time, and that staff members would hand them out to women before parties began. In 1976, one woman was reportedly drugged and assaulted in the basement, then left unconscious for hours before anyone found her. These stories came from former assistants who said that drugs were everywhere from 1975 to 1980, and that women were regularly given substances without their knowledge or consent. One of Hefner's former girlfriends said she was given a sedative in her wine in 1978 and didn't remember what happened until the next morning. She later realized that she had been recorded while she was unconscious, and that the video had been added to Hefner's collection in the basement. Even more disturbing were the FBI files that were discovered in the mansion after Hefner's death in 2017. A 58-page file was found in the basement showing that federal agents had been following Hefner since the late 1950s and early 1960s. They suspected he was breaking laws about inappropriate content, especially after he published certain photos in his magazine. In 1963, Hefner was actually arrested, but he won his case in court. The FBI files included memos that were sent to the famous Director J. Edgar Hoover, asking for permission to wiretap Hefner's phones and spy on his activities. These documents showed that Hefner had been walking a dangerous line with the law since the very beginning of his career. The files also revealed that the FBI suspected there were connections between Hefner's organization and organized crime figures, though they were never able to prove anything concrete. But the fact that these files were hidden in the basement alongside all the illegal recordings suggests that Hefner knew exactly how much trouble he could get into if everything was discovered. After Hefner died on September 27, 2017, the truth about what had been happening in the basement finally started to come out. In January 2022, a documentary series called Secrets of Playboy aired on television and revealed many of these disturbing details for the first time. The documentary included interviews with former girlfriends, employees, and mansion guests who described a culture of control, manipulation, and abuse that had gone on for decades. Many women said they had been drugged, filmed without their consent, and threatened if they tried to speak out about what they had experienced. Crystal Harris, who was married to Hefner from 2012 until his death, wrote a book in 2024 describing what life in the mansion was really like. She said that Hefner controlled every aspect of her life, including what she wore, how she styled her hair, and even what color nail polish she was allowed to use. She also revealed that he often pretended to be sicker than he actually was in order to keep her from leaving him alone. Perhaps most disturbing of all, Crystal said that after Hefner's death, she found thousands of compromising photos and videos in the basement and destroyed them to protect the privacy of the women who had been recorded without their knowledge. The revelations from the documentary and Crystal's book led to a wave of lawsuits against Hefner's estate. By 2022, more than 10 women had filed legal claims, including a class action lawsuit from 5 women seeking $10 million in damages. In 2018, a former playmate named Susie Crabtree sued Hefner's estate, claiming that she had been assaulted in 1980 and that the entire incident had been recorded on one of the basement tapes. She wasn't the only one. Many of the lawsuits specifically mentioned the existence of these secret recordings and demanded that they be turned over as evidence. The basement vaults were found contained more than 1,000 hours of footage, with some tapes showing incidents that dated back to 1979. Many of these legal cases ended in quiet settlements, with the exact terms kept secret from the public. Today, the Playboy Mansion sits empty and decaying. In 2016, Hefner sold the property for $100 million to a neighbor, though he was allowed to continue living there until his death. The new owner plans to combine the mansion with his adjacent property to create one enormous estate. But the question remains, what happened to all those recordings and files that were stored in the basement? Some were reportedly destroyed by Crystal Harris, but others may still exist somewhere. The FBI files, the thousands of hours of secret recordings, the detailed logs of who visited when all of this evidence of decades of legal activity may still be hidden away, waiting to surface someday. The story of Hugh Hefner's basement shows us how power can corrupt people in the most terrible ways. What started as a magazine celebrating freedom and rebellion became a system for controlling and exploiting vulnerable women. The man who presented himself as a champion of liberation was actually using his wealth and influence to trap people in situations they couldn't escape from. The basement of the Playboy Mansion wasn't just a storage space for secrets. It was the headquarters of a criminal enterprise that operated for decades, while the world saw only the glamorous parties happening upstairs. The stone vaults and hidden tunnels that once seemed mysterious and exciting were actually hiding evidence of some of the most disturbing crimes in Hollywood history. For years, people admired Hugh Hefner as someone who had built an empire and lived exactly the way he wanted to live. But the truth that emerged from that basement shows us that his empire was built on the suffering of others, and that the lifestyle he promoted as fun and liberating was actually a carefully constructed trap for the people who got caught up in it. The women who came forward to tell their stories about what really happened at the Playboy Mansion showed incredible courage. Many of them waited decades to speak out because they were afraid of what might happen to them if they told the truth. Some of them are still dealing with the trauma of what they experienced in that house and in those underground rooms. Their stories remind us that behind every glamorous facade, there might be something much darker hiding underneath. The parties that looked so fun in magazines and on television were covering up a reality that was filled with fear, control, and abuse. Hugh Hefner spent his entire adult life creating an image of himself as a fun-loving guy who just wanted everyone to have a good time. But the evidence found in his basement tells a completely different story. It shows us a man who used his power to hurt people and then used technology to make sure they could never speak out about what happened to them. The basement of the Playboy Mansion held much more than just secrets. It held evidence of crimes, proof of a system designed to exploit vulnerable people, and the truth about one of America's most famous men. That truth is darker than anyone could have imagined, and it shows us how important it is to look beyond the surface of what we see in the media. The legacy of Hugh Hefner will forever be tainted by what was discovered in that basement. No amount of charity donations or claims about supporting free speech can erase the evidence of what he did to the people who trusted him. The mansion that once seemed like a symbol of the American dream became a symbol of how power can be used to destroy lives. If this story shocked you as much as it shocked me, please hit that like button and share this video with others who need to know the truth about what really happened at the Playboy Mansion. Make sure to subscribe to this channel for more investigations into the dark secrets that powerful people try to hide. Because the truth always comes out eventually, even when it's buried in the basement of one of the most famous houses in America. The women who survived Hugh Hefner's system deserve to have their stories heard, and we owe it to them to make sure that what happened in that basement is never forgotten or repeated.